What's up everyone? It's finally time for me to kick off this updated series of PlayStation 3 tutorials.
Kept you waiting, huh?
As this is going to be my first video tutorial uploaded this year, it's taken me quite a while to get back into the hang of content creation again, as well as get all my software and settings reconfigured on my new computer here. Hopefully this will be the start of something beautiful though, and I'll now be able to get back into regular content uploads again, just like old times. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at how to install the PlayStation 3 Homebrew Enabler, or PS3 HEN, which is the latest exploit released for the PS3, and I think it's a really big deal due to the fact that it can be installed on any model of the PlayStation 3 hardware, even those running the absolute latest system firmware, which is 4.84 as of the time of uploading this video. It's been a long time coming for the PS3 scene, but thanks to the efforts of many hardworking developers such as Habib, Escorchu, and the entire PS3 exploit team, we are for the first time able to say that you can pick up absolutely any model PS3 console, including the final SuperSlim variation, and soft mod them so that they are able to launch native PlayStation 3 Homebrew. Previously, we could only run PlayStation 3 Homebrew on systems which had custom firmware installed, but now that we have PS3 HEN, all models of the PlayStation 3 will be able to run Homebrew and unlock some of the best quality of life improvements that were previously exclusive to custom firmware users, such as the ability to rip your games from the Blu-ray disc drive so that they can be launched from the system's internal hard drive or attached USB storage instead. Now that's just one of my favourite features of running Homebrew on a PlayStation 3 system. Being an avid game collector, it's quite nice not having to take a disc off the shelf every time you want to play the game, and also there's less noise, you don't have to listen to the optical drive spinning up during load screens, etc. But actually there are so many advantages to running HEN on the PlayStation 3, too many in fact for me to list in this video. What I would like to do though is list a couple of key advantages of running PS3 HEN for users who currently only have the HEN exploit installed on their PlayStation 3, and they may be undecided on if they really need to bother about this latest PS3 HEN release, and what benefits HEN has over HEN. So to all the PS3 exploit version 3 or HEN users out there, just so you know, by installing PS3 HEN on your system, the first major advantage is the one we've discussed already, which is the ability to run native PS3 Homebrew. This is huge for a variety of different reasons. Some of the best PS3 Homebrew you'll be able to run though will be things like backup managers such as Multiman, Irisman, or Web Manager. You'll also be able to install the popular RetroArch emulation suite, which essentially helps transform your PlayStation 3 into a very competent emulation device capable of running thousands of glorious retro games. Another big advantage of HEN over HEN is it makes it possible for you to launch PlayStation 3 games that never received update patches. This includes games like Kingdom Hearts and Devil May Cry 4. So for those of you who followed my older PS3 Exploit version 3 HEN tutorials, you may remember there are a lot of different conditions about whether or not PlayStation 3 content could be run on a system without custom firmware. For games that never released on the PlayStation Store in the PKG format, an update patch was a requirement to get the games to boot because we could take the eboot files from those updates and then get the content running on HEN that way. This was of course quite frustrating to HEN users at the time because it meant that if a game was released on Blu-ray disc, never released in the PlayStation Store, and never received an update patch, there was no way of launching those backups on a HEN system. But thanks to PS3 HEN, we now do have a path to boot those games. So there's also PlayStation 1 ISO support right out of the box with PS3 HEN. We can also enjoy wrap activation on the fly. Again, those who watched the original PS3 Exploit version 3 HEN videos will remember that activating PKG files was quite a process and involved some tools being used on the computer. Well, with HEN we can simply copy the wrap files across to the EX data folder, either on a USB memory stick or the internal hard drive, and enjoy on-the-fly activation, which is quite a bit quicker and simpler, definitely. There's also a bunch of really nice media features included in HEN, which I think that not even custom firmware had, such as DVD region check patches, as well as full Blu-ray disc and DVD ISO support. HEN has also introduced support for boot plugins. There's always quite a bit of potential around plugins, you never know what might be developed there. And yeah, this is just a scattered selection of some of my favorite things that HEN can do that you wouldn't be able to do on a HEN enabled system. There's actually loads of other features included in PS3 HEN. Be sure to check out the README file if you would like to see a full comprehensive list of all of them. It is safe to say though that with all of the advantages HEN has over HEN, I would definitely recommend justifying the few minutes to update your existing HEN systems to PS3 HEN. Now, just before we get into the tutorial talking about how to install HEN, it's worth noting a couple of things. Firstly, if you have a fat PlayStation 3 or the early model Slim, which has a model number of 251XB or anything lower than that, that is to say a Slim which was manufactured before or around December of 2010, then you have what is known as a downgradable PS3, which is capable of installing a full custom firmware on it. Custom firmware is still the ultimate state for a PlayStation 3, as it provides higher levels of access to the hardware than HEN alone will. So if your model of PlayStation 3 is capable of installing custom firmware, you may want to go ahead and look up a guide to installing custom firmware first if you don't have it already, as a majority of PS3 HEN's features are designed to help users who own models of PS3 which aren't capable of running custom firmware. So even though I'm well aware I'm a little bit late to the party with covering PS3 HEN, it's actually kind of a good thing, because as of the 11th of June, version 2.2.2 of PS3 HEN has been released, and a lot of updates have been made since the initial 1.0 release, including a much more streamlined and simple installation process. So fortunately today I'll be able to show you the much simpler process of installing PS3 HEN. Enough talk, let's get it done. Okay, so I've just switched on my fat PlayStation 3 here, and we're going to come across to the system settings and system information. So we can see here that my fat PS3 is running 4.82 official firmware. So the first step for this console is I'm going to update it to the latest 4.84 official firmware. Now technically at the moment you can just use the system update option here, but we've got no way of knowing when Sony could release 4.85 or some higher version of the firmware which is going to patch this exploit out. So instead of downloading the firmware update on the PS3 here, I'm just going to walk you through doing it on the computer. We're going to need to do that for the hybrid firmware step anyway, so we might as well do it while updating the console to 4.842. Just to be a little bit safer. So make sure you have some USB storage handy, and let's switch to the computer now. Alright team, so if your PS3 is like mine and it's not running the latest 4.84 firmware, then the first thing you're going to want to download is 4.84 official firmware from Sony. So you can grab this official firmware file from either of the first two links in the video description. First link will be directly to the Sony website, but of course as soon as they push out an update to the firmware, they probably stop offering it on their webpage. So the second link will be a mega link that you can use to grab 4.84 official firmware instead. So anyway, go ahead and download the 4.84 firmware file here now, and then go ahead and connect the USB storage to your computer. So I've just gone ahead and inserted a 16 gig USB flash drive to my computer, and you need to make sure that it is formatted with the FAT32 file system. Needs to be FAT32 or else the PlayStation 3 is not going to be able to recognize the drive. So then with the FAT32 USB drive, just go ahead and create a folder. I'm going to give it the name PS3. Then inside this folder, we'll make another folder, call it Update, and this is where we're going to place the 4.84 firmware file. So yeah, you need to make sure that firmware file has this exact file name, ps3update.pup, and it needs to be in a folder on the USB drive, PS3, and then an update folder inside that PS3 folder. Once you've got the file in place, you can go ahead and disconnect the USB drive, and we'll switch back to the PlayStation 3. Okay, so back on the PS3, I've inserted that USB drive, and I'll just go ahead to the system update area. I'm going to choose update via storage media, and it has found 4.84 firmware on here, so I'll just go ahead and install this latest version of the firmware now. Now, if your PS3 hasn't detected your USB storage, just double check that you had the file name and the folder names correct. Another thing that's worth checking if you still can't get it to detect the USB drive is that the disk has been initialized and uses the master boot record partition table. So you may have to use some partition software to check that. Okay, so my system just got done installing the firmware there. Okay, so now that my PS3 has the latest 4.84 firmware installed, the next step is we're going to install hybrid firmware. So again, we're going to need to switch back to the computer to make that happen. Okay, so back on the computer, you're going to need to download the hybrid firmware file. Now that's going to be the third link in the video description. Once you've finished downloading the file, we'll need to open it up and extract the .pup file. And with the file extracted, we also need to rename it to just be the PS3 update file name. So you can delete all the letters that came before that, and make sure that it's just called PS3 update.pup, just like the official firmware file we worked with earlier. So now go ahead and connect that same USB drive back to your computer. And in here, open up the PS3 update folder. And we can delete the official firmware file. And this time we're going to place the hybrid firmware file in that same folder. So with the hybrid firmware file in place, we can just go ahead and eject the USB memory again and switch back to the PlayStation 3. Okay, so the process for installing the hybrid firmware is going to be a little bit different. So make sure your PlayStation 3 has been powered completely off, and then just go ahead and hold down the power button on your PS3 and keep holding it. So after a few beeps, the LED light will turn red again. So we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to push and hold the power button and just keep holding it down until you hear like a double beep, and then we're going to release this time. So I just kept holding it until I heard that double beep this time, and then I released the power button to get into recovery mode. So you'll know when you got into recovery mode because it's going to tell you to connect the controller using a USB cable. So I've just gone ahead and connected my DualShock that way, and then push the home or PS button. Now in here we're going to scroll down to the bottom, choose option 6, system update. Now it's telling us to make sure that we have some USB storage with the update files in place, and then push start and select at the same time. So make sure you've got your USB storage with the hybrid firmware file on it and push start and select. Okay, so after a while it's brought us to this screen showing the hybrid firmware. Push the PS button. Okay, now it's got the user agreement. We'll accept that. And push X to start the install. Alright, so after a few minutes it looks like that firmware installation's been successfully finished. And I'll just tell it yes to outputting video and audio over HDMI. And with that process finished, my PlayStation 3 is now running the hybrid firmware. Now just before we continue on with the next steps, I'm going to forcefully show you guys the PS3exploit.com homepage, and specifically this warning. Now you can see when you load this page, it says, do not under any circumstances enable factory service mode or install CC API on a PS3 with PS3 HEN. So we're not going to be doing any of that in this video, and I just wanted you guys to see that warning because actually you don't have to load this page anymore, but it's good for you to know about this warning. Now also to explain what we just did, it is recommended to install hybrid firmware 4.84 twice, or install 4.84 official firmware, then hybrid firmware, before using any of the 4.84 exploits. So you can see what I just did with my PS3 was I installed 4.84 official firmware, and then hybrid firmware, and that's recommended to avoid bugs down the line with HEN. Now if you skipped the 4.84 official firmware update because maybe you already had it, then what I would suggest you do, and what the developers are suggesting here as well, is go ahead and install hybrid firmware twice. So basically just repeat that hybrid firmware installation process I just showed twice on your system. It'll only take you a few minutes, and it does potentially avoid bugs down the line, so highly recommended that you do that, definitely. Okay, so just before we get started with installing HEN, I would go ahead and suggest that you make sure that your PlayStation 3 has been activated. That'll make sure that your system can work with PSN content and DLC, things of that nature. And it's recommended to do this before you have HEN because we do need to connect to Sony's PlayStation Network to activate. So make sure that your PlayStation 3 is connected to the network, and then go ahead and sign into the PlayStation Network. I just use my main PlayStation Network account, there's no issues with that. Now once you're signed into the PlayStation Network, you can choose Account Management. Then in here look for System Activation. Choose PS3 System. Choose Game. And choose Activate System. Hopefully it'll come up and say Activation Completed. And that's how we know that we have the act.dat and IDPS files in place correctly once the system has been activated. So with that done, you could just push triangle and sign out of the PlayStation Network if you would like to. Alright team, so here's where the magic happens. The new HEN easy installer method can be applied. So all we have to do is head to the network section of XMB, look for internet browser. Now in here just push the start button, and we're going to type in the following internet address. So it's www.ps3exploit.com/hen/installer. Now just push the start button once that URL is typed in. It should bring you to this page and start downloading the HEN file that it needs. Download completed, it says. HEN should now install. Looks like it's updating to the latest version now as well. Very neat how it's able to do all of these PKG files automatically for us from the browser like this. Okay, so it says install completed. And now once that install is finished, we're just going to go ahead and power off the system, because a reboot is required at this point, I believe. So if everything's been successful, you should see that new HEN icon when booting the system up. As well as in the game section of XMB here, we should be able to find this enable HEN icon. Also the package manager should make a return directly below it. So with that done, we've installed HEN, and now to start HEN, all you need to do is basically push X on the enable HEN icon once each time the system boots up, and that'll get the Homebrew enabler running on your PS3. Also, the enable HEN feature should become the default landing icon in XMB. To make that work properly, the developer has suggested that you come into the system settings area, look for display, what's new, and just go ahead and turn this off. So that's in the README file for HEN, so you might as well do that just to make HEN a little bit more streamlined. Also with HEN installed in the network area of XMB, you should notice there's a hybrid firmware tools and a PS3 exploit home option in here added now as well. So the hybrid firmware tools is pretty neat. You can restart your PS3 quickly in here, and also at the bottom take note there's a PS3 HEN updater. So anytime a new version of PS3 HEN comes out, you should just be able to use this function to go ahead and update to the latest versions of PS3 HEN. So just a quick demonstration of some of HEN's functionality on my system here now. As this was a system I used to run HEN on, I'd be willing to bet that after a reboot, which I have just restarted my PlayStation by the way, I'll be unable to launch either of these two Resident Evil games. So as you can see, I'm getting an error during the start operation of both Resident Evil or Resident Evil 0 here. But if I go ahead and run HEN after rebooting my PS3, as long as you see that welcome to PS3 HEN and it's successfully able to launch HEN, it should now make my system capable of launching this content. And indeed I can see the PlayStation 3 game loading up here successfully. So yeah, like I said, anything HEN can do, HEN's going to be able to do it better. Alright boys and girls, so now that PS3 HEN has been installed on this PlayStation 3 here, that's pretty much going to bring this video to a close. I'll just go ahead and answer some common questions that I know quite a few of you may have. So first of all, yes, having HEN installed on your system does mean you'll be able to work with PS3 game backups in either the folder format or the ISO format. There is also support for PlayStation 1 ISOs here with HEN, and regarding PS2 games, we will be able to work with some of those that are compatible with the Classics emulator. To any of you out there who may be completely new to the PlayStation 3 scene and overwhelmed by a lot of this, or just confused as to what you can do with HEN, don't worry, we got you. This video has just been designed to be the first opening part of a PS3 HEN series, and I'm going to be doing a lot of uploads going over some of my favorite homebrew that you can run, and some of the coolest things you can do on a HEN enabled system. So be sure to subscribe and enable notifications if you'd like to see when I upload those. Okay, so another question some of you might have is using PlayStation 3 Homebrew safe on a HEN enabled system? So the answer to that is a lot of PlayStation 3 Homebrew was actually designed with custom firmware in mind over the last, almost 10 years now. Some homebrew applications, it's not going to matter. They'll run pretty much the same way on either custom firmware or HEN. Some homebrew applications, like managers though, are very feature rich, and some of the features are only supported on custom firmware. If you run custom firmware builds of those releases, then it can have some issues on HEN. So if you're wanting to get started with installing a bunch of homebrews straight away, then make sure to check out one of the links in the description, which is to the PS3 HEN compatibility chart. It's a really handy page which can help show you which releases are going to work well or have been ported to work on PS3 HEN. And finally, a few people have reached out to me asking about the possibility of playing online on a HEN enabled system. Like always, if you're going to run exploits while connected to the PlayStation network, you should definitely be aware that you are taking a risk. It's still too early for me to know all the differences between HEN and custom firmware and how it affects the risk of being banned. Although I will share that I do know of at least one person who has been playing his legit copy of Destiny online with HEN enabled, doing things like taking screenshots, and he hasn't been insta-banned, so I guess that's a good sign for people who are wanting to play their legit games with HEN enabled while connected to the PlayStation Network. Like I've mentioned in the past though in some of my PSN videos, don't expect to be able to take a backup copy of a game like Destiny, Call of Duty, or GTA online without an anti-ban patched e-boot. Doing so would get you banned extremely quickly. Also, I feel like we can't say this enough. A massive thank you to all of the active PlayStation 3 developers who have helped make all this magic happen. For those of you out there who PS3 HEN really helps, be sure to show some love to the PlayStation 3 developers. I'm going to include a link to their PS3 exploit paypal.me. So this is a page where you can donate directly to the PS3 exploit development team. So this will help cover some of their hosting costs, as well as it's a great way to say thank you for all the time they've spent bringing Homebrew through to the latest models of PlayStation 3 hardware. I want to give a massive shout out and thank you to all of you watching as well. Really appreciate the overwhelmingly positive response you guys had to my previous video. I really missed all of you as well, so it's been great seeing some of you find your way back to the new channel here. I'll just need to stay active and keep smashing out uploads, and hopefully most of the crew can find their way home. And on that note, if you're wanting to help the channel here, the best way you can do that for the foreseeable future is just going to be by liking the video, share the links to the videos you enjoy far and wide. You can link your friends to help them discover the wonderful world of Homebrew, or just share the links around online in your favorite subreddits or communities. If you have any ideas for content that you'd like to see included in the PlayStation 3 series, or just anything you want to see me cover on the channel, feel free to let us know about it by either leaving a comment to this video, or you can join the channel's Discord server and sound off in there. Thank you all so much for watching and joining the Homebrew crew. Have a beautiful day, team. Peace out.